All right, so we're diving into Fooled by Randomness by Nassim Nicholas Taleb.
Yeah, this book, it's a cult classic, I think.
It is, especially I think in the finance world,
Oh, yeah, for sure, definitely. But it goes way beyond that.
but it's applicable to, I mean, just about every part of life.
Definitely, definitely. I think it's one of those that can really change how you think about success and even failure and just like how much control we actually have.
Yeah, it's pretty eye-opening.
Yeah,
How often, like, we just think things are skill when actually it's just luck.
totally. And it's interesting, right? Because Taleb, he comes from that world.
Yeah.
He's a trader, he's run hedge funds, and he's a fellow at Current. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like he's just, theorizing.
Right, he's been in the thick of it.
Totally, totally. Which I think gives him a lot of credibility
Yeah, for sure.
on this topic.
So in our deep dive today, let's explore how randomness and chance can look like skill
Okay.
and how easy it is to misinterpret things.
Perfect. Yeah.
He's got some fascinating examples,
Yeah, yeah.
like Nero Tulip.
Yeah, he's a great example of the trader who looks like he has like the Midas touch, but then it
Yeah.
all falls apart.
Let's actually start before Nero with one of Taleb's opening anecdotes,
Okay.
which is Croesus and Solon.
All right.
So Croesus, king of Lydia, super rich, super powerful, asks Solon, "Who's this wise Greek guy?
Yeah.
Aren't I the happiest man alive?"
Yeah.
And Solon basically says, "Hold your horses, buddy. No one can be called truly happy until they're dead."
It's like such a good setup
Yeah.
for this whole book because
Yeah.
fortune can change just like that
Exactly.
in an instant, you know?
And that's like, it makes me think of that problem of induction,
Oh, yeah.
right? Where you see like a few data points, maybe someone's on a winning streak or a company has a hot stock,
Hmm.
and you're like, oh, it's all skill or this is going to keep going up.
It's like the market, right? It's been up for 5 years, so it's got to keep going up, right?
Right.
But, it's basing judgments on very limited observations without taking into account all these unseen events that could totally flip things around.
Which brings us back to Nero Tulip.
Yeah.
So this wildly successful trader
Yeah.
makes millions. Everyone thinks he's a genius. And then, boom, some random event. Taleb doesn't even tell us what it is. Wipes him out.
Yeah, and it's not like he loses his talent or anything.
Right.
It's that he's operating under this illusion of control
Yeah.
and doesn't realize that so much of what's going on is just chance.
So how do we account for these alternative histories, all these unseen events that could have happened but didn't?
That's where this idea of alternative histories comes in.
Yeah.
Taleb says we need to imagine all the paths an event could have taken, not just the one that actually happened.
So for every Nero Tulip that makes millions, there could be 10 other, like, equally talented traders who are just unlucky,
Exactly.
and we don't see them.
Exactly.
And so then we draw these conclusions just based on the winners.
That's exactly right.
It's almost like we're always playing Russian roulette, and we just focus on the people who survive each round,
That's a great analogy.
but not the ones that didn't make it.
Yeah, and it's made worse by something he calls smooth peer relations,
Okay.
where we surround ourselves with people who have similar outcomes. So it validates our worldview.
So everyone you know is a successful entrepreneur, you're like, oh, that's just normal.
Totally,
But-
but it's not.
It's like this echo chamber where you can't tell what's luck and what's skill,
And you might make decisions based on that.
which can be really dangerous.
Yeah, okay, so how do we get out of that trap?
Well, Taleb suggests using something called Monte Carlo simulation.
Okay.
It's not about predicting the future, but rather running these thousands of hypothetical situations to see how things might play out.
So instead of focusing on like the one most likely outcome, you're forced to consider all the other ones.
Yeah, all these possibilities, even these like black swan events that we tend to ignore.
It helps you appreciate how easily things could have been different.
Totally, yeah. Okay, so we've got Solon's warning about like fortune changing quickly, the problem of induction, illusion of control, alternative histories, this echo chamber effect.
There's a lot
Yeah,
to think about.
there's a lot to unpack here.
For sure. In the next part, we'll go even deeper into how our brains are wired to look for patterns even when they're not really there.
Sounds good. So for those listening, buckle up.
Yeah.
It's going to be a wild ride through the world of randomness.
Definitely. Welcome back to our deep dive. We were talking about, how our brains just love to find patterns.
Oh, yeah, even when they're not there.
Right. It's like there are these pattern-making machines
They are.
always trying to make sense of the chaos.
Yeah, and that can be really helpful in a lot of situations.
Oh, for sure.
But it can also totally trip us up.
Especially when we're talking about random events.
Yeah, Taleb calls it the narrative fallacy,
Right.
where we like impose a story on something to make it make sense,
Yes.
even if the story is not like accurate.
Exactly. And he uses a bunch of examples.
Yeah.
Like there's this guy, Mark, who's a lawyer living in Manhattan.
Yeah, Mark. I remember Mark.
Yeah, he's doing pretty well. Good job, family, nice life.
Yeah.
But he's constantly surrounded by these super rich hedge fund managers
That feels bad about him.
and starts feeling like he's a failure.
Yeah.
Which is like classic survivorship bias.
Yeah.
He's comparing himself to like this tiny sliver of winners.
Right. Not all the people who tried and didn't make it.
Exactly. And it's like, imagine going to some fancy gala
Okay.
and everyone around you looks like a supermodel.
Yeah.
You're going to feel pretty bad about yourself.
Right. But it's not the full picture.
It's a very curated slice of reality.
Right.
And so you end up with these really distorted ideas about success, about happiness, about what's even possible.
Yeah. And it reminds me of what Taleb says about that book, The Millionaire Next Door,
Oh, yeah. Good point.
where they argue that most millionaires are like frugal. They live below their means. They're hardworking.
Right.
But Taleb points out, like, they only talk to the millionaires.
Yeah, the survivors.
He didn't talk to all the people who tried to do that and failed.
Exactly.
So it's like saying, oh, the key to winning the lottery is to buy a ticket on a Tuesday.
Right. Just because that's what the last winner did.
Right. But you're ignoring all these other factors.
All the other variables, and that one data point might just be totally random.
Right. We're back to that problem of induction.
We are.
So how do we, like, not fall into this trap? How do we get better at seeing, survivorship bias and all these other things?
Well, I think the first step is just being aware.
Okay.
Just knowing that these biases exist
Yeah.
can help you be more critical of the information you come across.
So instead of being like, oh, wow, look at that person. They're so successful. Their method must work. You're like, wait a minute. What's the context here?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And I think Taleb also really stresses understanding the role of chance. That even the most talented people can fail if the odds aren't in their favor.
Which is kind of a humbling thought, right? Like you think, oh, if I just work hard enough, I'll be successful.
Right.
But it's not always that simple.
No, sometimes luck plays a huge part.
But I guess it's also kind of freeing in a way.
It is. It takes off some of the pressure.
Yeah.
It lets you focus on what you can actually control.
Okay, so we've got survivorship bias, narrative fallacy, this problem of induction, the role of chance. What else does Taleb say about how our brains can trick us?
Well, a big chunk of the book is about how we just really misunderstand probability.
Okay.
We see patterns where they don't exist. We misinterpret coincidences. We think we can predict the future way better than we actually can.
So like that feeling when you're at the casino and you're on a winning streak and you think, I've got this figured out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get swept up in the moment and think you have way more control than you do.
And it's not just casinos, right? This happens everywhere.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Like Taleb uses this great example of a money manager
Oh, yeah.
who has like a 50-50 chance of making or losing money each year.
That's right. Totally random.
And just by pure chance, some of them are going to have a string of winning years.
And they look like geniuses.
Yeah, and everyone's like, what's their secret?
Right, but as Taleb points out, it's just statistics.
It's like flipping a coin.
Exactly. If you flip a coin enough times, you're going to get a bunch of heads in a row eventually.
Right,
Doesn't mean the coin is rigged or you have some special coin-ferring power.
right. It's same with the stock market. There's just so much randomness.
So much we can't control.
So then how do we deal with all this uncertainty?
That's the big question, and that's what we'll get into in the next part.
Okay.
Taleb actually gives us some pretty practical advice on how to, manage risk and make better decisions in a world full of surprises.
Sounds good. Let's wrap this part up and get to the practical stuff. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Fooled by Randomness.
Yeah.
And, we've been talking about how easy it is to think luck is skill.
Totally.
How our brains are wired to see these patterns even when they're not really there.
Right.
And how all that can lead us to make some, not so great decisions.
Yes, definitely.
So now we're getting to the part where Taleb actually gives some advice
Okay.
about how to live with this awareness of randomness,
Yeah.
which he calls randomitis.
Right.
And I think it's interesting. He starts off by being super humble.
Yeah.
He actually calls the chapter, I Am Not So Intelligent.
It's a good one. And it's not about him putting himself down. It's
Right.
more about recognizing that even if you understand randomness intellectually, you're still human. You've still got emotions.
Yeah.
And those emotions can really mess with your decision making.
So it's not about becoming like some emotionless robot.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Taleb even says that he struggles with this,
Especially in trading where the stakes are so high.
especially in that world. Yeah.
So how do you manage those emotions then? Like, let's say you're watching your portfolio just tank when the market crashes.
Well, one thing Taleb suggests is what he calls the Odyssean mute command.
Oh, yeah. Odysseus plugging his ears with wax so he couldn't hear the sirens.
Exactly. It's about learning to block out the noise,
Okay.
not reacting emotionally to every little thing that happens.
Which is so hard to do,
It is.
especially these days where we're just bombarded with information constantly.
Yeah. Everyone's freaking out about the latest market news.
Yeah, so what do you do?
Well, Taleb says it's really important to have a clear plan,
Okay.
like a set of rules that you stick to no matter what's happening around you.
So you take the emotion out of it as much as possible.
Exactly, as much as you can.
It's like having a pre-flight checklist for your investments.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
Keeps you grounded when things get turbulent.
And this ties back to what we were talking about before, those gamblers' ticks and pigeons in a box.
Oh yeah, those pigeons.
Right. They develop all these weird superstitions,
Because they thought they were controlling when the food came out.
even though it was totally random.
Totally random.
And Taleb says we do the same thing, right?
We do. We create these rituals.
Like the trader who always wears his lucky socks on a big trading day.
Yeah, or the investor who refuses to sell a stock because it was a birthday gift.
It's like we're trying to impose order on this chaotic world.
We are, even when it's not really there.
And those little ticks, they might seem harmless.
But they can really lead you down the wrong path.
Yeah, so it's not enough to just understand randomness in your head.
Right. It's about recognizing those emotional and behavioral patterns, too.
Right.
The things that can really trip you up.
And I think that leads to one of Taleb's most important points.
Which is?
Humility.
Humility, yeah.
We need to accept that we don't have all the answers.
We don't know what's going to happen.
And sometimes things just happen.
They do.
It's about getting comfortable with not knowing.
Which is a huge mental shift for a lot of people.
It is. It's like embracing the unknown.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into Taleb's final argument, which is all about this idea of the open society.
Okay, so what does that mean?
It's a society that's open to new ideas, to challenging assumptions, to accepting that randomness plays a big role in everything.
So instead of clinging to, like, rigid beliefs,
Yeah, you have to be flexible.
you got to be adaptable, willing to change your mind.
Exactly, because in a world that's just getting more and more complex and unpredictable, that's what's going to help you navigate all the twists and turns.
So that wraps up our deep dive into Fooled by Randomness.
It's been a wild ride.
It has. Definitely mind-bending.
Yeah.
But I think if I had to sum up the key takeaway,
Yeah.
it's that we can't control randomness, but we can control how we respond to it.
That's it. That's the key.
And by understanding our biases and
Yeah.
managing our emotions.
And having this kind of like probabilistic view of the world.
Hopefully we can make better decisions.
And live a little more wisely.
So to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening.
And until next time, keep questioning your assumptions. And remember, you might just be fooled by randomness.